This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised. They mostly come out at night. Mostly. Welcome back to another episode of a podcast, Rare Antiquities, episode 25. On today's show, we will sink our teeth into Kathryn Bigelow's 1987 vampire flick, Near Dark. I am your host, Harry.
I am your co-host, Jeff.
So, Jeff, first off, happy Halloween for last month. We are now at the end of November. My bad on the delay. I've just been too busy working up at a plant in northern Alberta and, just working long hours and stuff, and then just exhausted when I come home with the kids. And I even missed Halloween. But did you have a good Halloween this year? Or did you do anything of interest? Because I seem to recall last year you mentioned your drunken ass self was chucking candy at kids.
Yeah, it's an annual tradition. I like to drive around with a wolf mask on and just throw old hardened candies at poor little children. So, they figure they got it coming, don't they?
Wow. as long as they're not my kid.
Well, hey man, don't send them out after sunset, I guess is all the only advice I have for you on that one.
Okay. So, Near Dark, I think last time you said you never heard about it. So, before we get into the movie, I just kind of wanted to talk about the vampire horror genre in general. I mean, can you fill me in on any experiences or memories you have watching this genre? Is there anything you're liking, something that interests you?
So in the vampire genre, I mean, it's pretty varied and wide-ranging. Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gary Oldman, I think is it's not one of my favorite movies, but I sure enjoy it just because it's really out there. It's a different take. Past that, I don't know. I kind of liked Wesley Snipes in Blade. As far as the genre goes, I don't know that I could really put my finger on a lot of vampire movies that I really enjoy. I'm a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, and its spin-offs, but that's about it. What about you?
I mean, you mentioned Buffy. I mean, my wife introduced me to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and yeah, I watched most of it, but I think I was more caught up in Angel, and I made it through that show, even though it still was a mixed bag. I mean, but that's a type of TV genre, young adult, kind of light fluff stuff that, it serves its purpose for certain demographics. It's not like classical works of art. Yeah, I mean, Blade is obviously good. I remember seeing when I was younger some of those Hammer films, like starring Christopher Lee as Dracula. Probably, I think it was just called Dracula. That was one of my earlier exposures to vampire films. I mean, I can't recall which one. That might be the first one. But probably my favorite, I agree with you, is Bram Stoker's Dracula, done by Coppola, which has Gary Oldman, because it is... I love the visual style of that movie, and it just feels very weird but appropriate. And it feels it's not goth, but it's somewhere where it's just like bizarre and fantastical. And I really enjoyed that visual style with a Dracula film, even though there are problems with that movie for sure. But that was I definitely enjoyed that one. Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I don't know if you ever saw this movie, Monster Squad. That was another one.
Oh, I love the Monster Squad.
Wolfman's got nards, man. I mean, that had everybody in it. So, I mean, that's another one of my, I guess, favorites. I haven't seen that movie since I was a kid, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we could do it on the show sometime. It's one of those movies you could argue might be best left aging in your memory like a fine wine, as opposed to actually corking open that bottle and having a taste.
Yeah, again, that's like more very young adult. You're talking about Disney age type of take on something, right? So yeah. I would expect that. Unfortunately, over the past decade, vampires have been pretty popular with the unfortunate reality of Twilight, which I have had to suffer through because of my wife.
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
But, well, you know what? In the end,
we all have our guilty pleasures, but that's some bullshit.
Yeah, terrible films, even though I suffered through it. It does have a unique, weird fight at the end, which was kind of cool, but that's as much as I'll admit of enjoying those things. But again, those are both books for young adults, so I'm not going to bash something that was books, and it's, if it gets young adults to read, all the better. But the transition to film, I've never read the books, and I never will, so if that's what the books were, yikes. But hey, if young adults are reading, God bless them, so.
You gotta look at the silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess, like, what other shit out there. I mean, I've never seen True Blood, but I know of its existence. So, I mean, that's pretty popular. I think that's an HBO show.
Yeah.
Have you seen something like that?
I tried watching True Blood, and, I watch lots of violent TV shows and lots of gore. True Blood was way too much for me.
Oh, so maybe it's more up my alley.
It might be, man. It's wall-to-wall gore and depravity, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So yeah, maybe you'd like.
Oh, I mean, if I can get through Game of Thrones, I mean.
Yeah, I know. It's like Game of Thrones is kind of like, not like a walk in the park, but like, Game of Thrones might be like a bad weather day through the park compared to the tornado of blood and shit that is True Blood. So
okay.
I don't know.
Well, maybe I'll give that one a shot later. So yeah, I mean, there's more out there. I mean, I could have done a lot more research and gone through every single one. But one thing that does interest me, and I'm sure they've made a movie about this, but I really think more akin to Bram Stoker's Dracula would be, I really would like to see a movie based on Vlad the Impaler, because that's one of the earlier, he was obviously, there's no vampires, but this guy drank blood, he decapitated people in the past, like very violent individual, and I don't know the history around him, but I know he was one of the inspirations for Dracula. I think that he would make that kind of story and that character would interesting one to tell for the silver screen. So I've always been waiting for that one. So I'm surprised that is.
Yeah,
not.
I actually agree with you. I think that would be interesting, and given Hollywood's fascination with reboots and prequels and things like that, it's something that could almost conceive of happening, except that movie that came out this past year, Dracula Untold, was, the story of Vlad the Impaler, but it's done in a, fantasy.
That was about Vlad the Impaler? Are you serious?
Well, yeah, before he, it's the origin story of Dracula. So he's Vlad the Impaler, and he has to embrace, somehow he's, they make Dracula a superhero, so he needs an origin story, and it's Vlad the Impaler, and he becomes Dracula. I just
remember the commercials, so I remember him just wiping out armies and shit like that.
Yeah,
that's not Dracula.
No, it's ridiculous. That's what we get now with modern movies. So, are we going to see like a down-to-earth, reasonably budgeted, well-directed biopic of Vlad the Impaler? Maybe not this generation.
Maybe there's a HBO series after Westworld.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go.
True Blood's Origins, Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go, HBO.
True Blood, episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Awesome.
In which Dracula is a whiny little brat with a CGI sidekick.
Awesome. I'm in, man. As long as Jar Jar gets an appearance, I'm a happy man. So
he'd probably be right at home in that world of freaks and weirdos and stuff.
I won't be able to concentrate. I'm just going to be thinking about that now. But anyways.
I know.
So I guess another type of question before we get into these. So about the vampire flicks in general and the genre, why is it such an attraction from your perspective there's a couple of obvious answers, but to you, why is it an attraction for people to keep coming back and watching vampires? What is it about the characters or the genre or the mythology that really draws people to keep watching?
It's an old myth, so obviously there's some deeper root in our culture. So when it comes through the movies and TV shows, those are trees coming out of very deep roots in our culture. So, you'd have to look at that. I think there's a couple reasons. I mean, the obvious one is the flirting with immortality. Everybody wants to live forever and be young forever, which is sort of the promise of the myth. Mm-hmm. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think that and I think a lot of people don't really acknowledge this, but it's the exploration of a darker side of humanity, some of the baser instincts to, when you look at vampire movies, what are vampires doing? Basically, they eat and they fuck, and they have a hell of a time doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no pretense in the vampire worlds. I mean, I guess that there is, lots of stories have layered different things on, but
that's a college man's, everyday routine, right?
Well, I guess he hopes so. Probably lots of eating anyway. So, I think that some of those baser instincts were of just pure hunger and sexual desire, and I don't want to say rage, but just the unadulterated.
You're right. I think you're driving more into letting go of all of your inhibitions that society has kind of thrust upon us through religious restrictions, society restrictions. You will be a good person. What defines a good person?
Yeah, and you won't indulge these things that poison your spirit. And I think, without having done an in-depth analysis, I think that there's a lot of that is why it continues to be appealing. I mean, we talked about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I know you weren't like a huge fan of that show, but a lot of that show as it progressed was wrestling with darkness, and even darkness wrestling with light. Some of the the evil characters that tried to become good, and the good characters that wrestled with the dark side, and what that means, like letting go of all of that shit and indulging just those those base emotions. So I think that's a lot of the appeal. They definitely cheese it up in most of the movies, and they just become monster flicks. But I think there's a lot more interesting material to be mined underneath it.
No, I think that's pretty much again, you're correct. I mean, we could go into a lot more analytical depth, but I think that pretty much covers it generically. So how about Kathryn Bigelow? So now let's move to her. So she has done 11 films as a director. I think this was her third or fourth outing. She had done a couple of very low-budgeted movies before this. She's also known for her more famous work, obviously Point Break, Strange Days, The Unfortunate Reality, that was K-19, The Widowmaker. But obviously known and got her accolades for The Hurt Locker, which she won an Oscar for Best Director, and most recently Zero Dark 30. So what is it about her? I'm sure you've seen at least a few of her movies. Can you comment on anything that you find interesting about her as a director or as a choice of the films that she's made?
Yeah, I find she's a very good filmmaker for sure. Very high level of technical proficiency. I find some of her work to be a little bit cold, a little sterile. Zero Dark 30 was basically a love letter to torture and justification for it. So I was a huge fan of that film. The Hurt Locker was very good. I think she's good, like I say, very technically proficient, and I think she's good with getting good performances out of her performers. I haven't seen all of her movies, but she did do a series of episodes of one of my favorite TV shows of all time called Homicide: Life on the Street. And her work was a natural fit for anybody listening who knows that TV show. Her work was a natural fit for that, which showcases characters in very mundane situations in a very workmanlike scenario, which are commonly glorified. So, she's made a couple war films. We've talked about Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker, but maybe you wouldn't classify them as war films, but they're more about people doing the work, right? And usually, if you took the subject matter of those two films, those things are glorified. We'd have a hero, with his foot up on a rock with the sun rising behind him and an American flag, flapping in the background. That's usually how that subject matter is portrayed. And she just goes about it where these are people doing a very difficult job. And just to bring back to the TV show that I was talking about, that's exactly how that TV show is. So she's a real natural fit on there. So I was a fan of her work on that TV show. So, but yeah, I had no idea this is kind of where she got her start. She's pretty famous now, and yeah, this is an interesting one to have in the filmography when you're such an acclaimed and accomplished director.
Well, you got to start somewhere. So it'll be what I take away. I mean, what you said is very well explained, and I agree with you. I haven't seen Strange Days, and that's something that I do want to catch one day. It's always been on my radar. But visually, her visual flair and her technical proficiency, I definitely agree with that. We'll even get into this movie. There are definitely some shots that are very interesting that she utilizes and accomplishes as a filmmaker. The Hurt Locker, definitely in terms of that visual artistic style, very good movie. Yeah, Zero Dark 30 was a little bit more about the work and a little more straightforward. K-19, let's just forget about that one. But Point Break, again, fun movie, more of a commercial mainstream movie. But I remember some of the visuals in that movie too, even though they were grounded in it's a real, set in a realistic environment. I also felt, from my memory, it was also a visually stunning, as far as you can get with Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting to analyze what your thoughts and my thoughts will be about this one. So how about we just get straight into plot summary here?
Let's do it.
Okay. It's a dark and stormy night. Just kidding. Meet Caleb, a young cowboy, nobody in a small town, out on the hunt to get laid, and he spots a drifter named May. After trying to seduce her, she actually kisses and then bites him on the neck right before sunrise. She runs away, and unfortunately for Caleb, the sun starts to cause Caleb's skin to smoke. It's hot and humid, but hey, at least it's a dry heat. Before Caleb can get back to his family, an RV drives by and Caleb is kidnapped. Here, Caleb meets May's group of ragtag friends who are definitely a couple cans short of a six-pack. Day here is like a day on the farm. They are the ultimate badasses. They've got phased plasma pulse rifles, RPGs, nukes, knives, and sharp sticks. Nope, sorry, just sharp teeth. May's team, led by Jesse, Diamondback, and Severin, are also joined by little Homer. They want to kill Caleb because May revealed herself as a vampire, and they want to keep their secret. But May tells him she bit him, and he is already starting to turn, so they let Caleb live for now. Caleb leaves the group, but his insatiable thirst for blood brings him back. Caleb continues to only feed off May, as he is unwilling to kill anything else. You see, you don't see him fucking anyone over for a percentage. Jesse and Severin are getting fed up with Caleb not accepting who he is, so they go to an isolated redneck bar to see if he will pass the test. Stop your grinning and drop your linen. Severin truly shows how to get things done here as he and his group slaughter everyone in the bar, leaving a sole survivor for Caleb. Caleb allows the one survivor to escape. Jesse is furious, but since sunrise is approaching, he has no time to deal with Caleb, and they all go to a motel to sleep it off and avoid the light. They are woken by police, and they are detecting signals in front and behind. Something is moving, and it ain't them. As the shootout begins, Caleb and company are trapped inside their motel room, and it's daylight outside. He saves the team by putting a bedsheet over him and making it for the van, getting shot several times, and he is cooking on fire, literally, and manages to bring the van so they can all escape. Caleb is temporarily forgiven, but then realizes that little Homer has lured Caleb's little sister Sarah in as prey to kill. You see, Caleb's father and sister have been looking for Caleb and have tracked him down. Caleb's sister opens the windows to let the sunlight in, and Caleb escapes with his family back to the farm. Caleb then suddenly looks into the future and somehow manages to retrieve con blood, and uses a blood transfusion to suddenly transform himself back to a normal human being. That night, the vampires come back and kidnap Sarah. Caleb gives chase on horseback and he faces off against Severin. Get out. Caleb commandeers a big semi-tractor trailer and runs Severin over, but Severin will not stop and does not feel pity or remorse, and suddenly is on the hood of the truck. Caleb manages to jackknife the vehicle and jumps out as the truck crashes and explodes, killing Severin. Dawn is approaching again, and Jesse and Diamondback are chasing Caleb down in their sun-proofed car. But May has a change of heart and breaks the back of the car and frees herself and Sarah. Horny Homer gives chase, but is engulfed in flames and dies. I'm sorry, that was more funny saying it than writing it.
No, you should have practiced before so you could have said it straight. That's okay.
All right. May is able to make it to Caleb when he covers her up before she dies. With the sunproofing on the car damaged, Jesse and Diamondback... Jesse and Diamondback attempt to run Caleb and May over, but they are lit on fire due to sun exposure, and the fire causes the car to explode. May is burned pretty bad, but when she wakes up, she realizes she doesn't need to go to Genesis, as it's planet forbidden. Conblood did the trick, and she is no longer a vampire too. The end. I apologize for the horny Homer. I think it would have been more funny if actually it was more horny than just hungry. That's why he ran after her. They're a little young, so I guess
I don't know.
Uncomfortable.
Those jeans were looking a little tight, so.
So based on that plot synopsis there, what are your firsts here?
Well, I mean, other than not really knowing what movie I'm watching, but yeah, it sounds like a pretty standard thriller type of movie from the synopsis, to be honest, right? Pretty simple. Like, it's simple.
Yeah, it's
straightforward. Simple.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but is there, based on the genres, now, I mean, now, obviously, there's good movies, there's bad movies, there's average movies, now we're talking about a specific genre. Is there something of interest here, just based on that you think, catches your eye, gets you interested, piques your interest? Just in what I said, is there anything there that, or you just think it's standard fare and the devil's in the details? Well,
I think the devil is in the details, and the more that we kind of get enveloped in the modern era of what we'll call modern, like right now in sort of the latter part of the second decade of the 21st century, where there's always a twist or a conspiracy or some shit going on, to have a movie that's not about that, where it is a character movie, that's what hooks me. Mm-hmm. I like a simple storyline. It's about, often it's about internal conflict with, like I said before, if we're talking about this genre, talking about vampires, it's not about vampires. It's about what's going on in those characters. So, there are a couple interesting points I think I'll save to when we actually kind of do the breakdown. But, I like that it's simple.
I was just curious if there was anything out there that I said that piqued your interest. But yeah, I think let's save that for as we do the blow by blow. So just give you a couple of pieces of trivia here. So this was a very low budget movie, especially considering it was the late 80s. Budget was only $5 million, but the unfortunate reality is it only made $3.3 million domestically. That's all the numbers I could find. But compare that to The Lost Boys, which came out just 2 months prior to this. The Lost Boys made $32 million.
Wow.
So you compare $32 million to $3.3 million. the Lost Boys it might have just been beating him to the punch, and they said, well, audiences had enough of vampires, so it's like, okay, well, I don't need to see another one. Or just because The Lost Boys might be a better movie than this, and then the bad word of mouth on this one could have contributed if that was indeed what happened. For what it's worth, though, Near Dark does sit at 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, again, for what that's worth, but is ranked 34 out of the top 50 best horror movies of all time. Again, on Rotten Tomatoes.
Huh.
Again, we'll take that for what it's worth. What really piqued your interest were the threesome of Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, and Jeanette Goldstein here, who just appeared right before in Aliens together, and they are also Jim Cameron regulars. So before I continue that, was that a nice surprise for you?
Oh, yeah, because I knew nothing about the movie and didn't know anything going in. You know, I don't know that I paid too much attention to the opening credits and the names that were in there, and I saw these guys rolling in. I'm like, shit, is James Cameron going to walk on to set here? Especially when I saw Jeanette Goldstein, I was like, sweet. This is awesome. I had no idea that Bigelow and Cameron were married. When I watched it, I was like, okay, obviously there's a Cameron connection here, because like every single James Cameron undercard star is in this movie, other than Michael Biehn, of course. But I love those guys, so it was awesome to see them. You know, you don't see Jeanette Goldstein in hardly anything.
Yeah, you don't.
You know, she has a nice presence on screen. She's not a fantastic actor, but it's nice. It was nice to see her, because I loved her in Aliens. So,
well, I mean, I've loved her in, like, I haven't hated her in a role. Granted, she hasn't been in, at least the movies I've seen, she hasn't had any meaty roles, but she's a good character actor. Yeah, and it's a shame we don't get to see her in more things, because I think she definitely could have broadened her horizon if she got maybe the opportunity. Maybe she just got typecast as the tough girl, and maybe just was just a friend of Jim Cameron and wanted nothing to do with anyone else. Who knows? But yeah, you mentioned Cameron and Bigelow were married. They were married for 3 years, from I think 89 to 91. Another little tidbit to the word vampire, never referenced in them once in the movie. But let's talk about the two main leads. Main protagonist is Adrian Pasdar. Caleb, played by Adrian Pasdar. He's, you know, kind of like, again, a small character actor. He's still active today. He got his break in Top Gun as one of the other kind of like co-pilots or something like that. He was he was in there. He was also in Carlito's Way, but I think most people would probably know him from the TV show Heroes. And I think he's still acting mostly in TV today. So May was played by the actress Jenny Wright. She hasn't acted since 1998, but she mainly relegated herself to a handful of small TV movies and TV shows, and so not sure what's happened to her. Horny Homer, played by Joshua John Miller. He's half brother to Jason Patric, actually. So,
oh, no shit.
Yeah, funny. So then it's like, you know, Lost Boys beat him to the punch. So I wonder how their relationship took off after that. He's stopped acting. He's more of a writer these days, and I think a TV series producer. I don't know which one. So that's it for the trivia. Any comments there?
Well, not really. I mean, that's Adrian Pasdar. I know obviously from his work there. I've never been a huge fan of his. He's all right, I guess. But like I say, I mean, I love Bill Paxton. I love Lance Henriksen. Jenny Wright I'd never seen in anything else as far as I know. So it's, you know, it definitely has the feel of, you know, a low budget indie film, you know?
Yeah, it does.
Sure.
Yeah, it does. And I think these are her earlier roles too. So, I mean, I think even for Pasdar, this might be third or fourth in his list. So, in terms of credits. So, and it shows, you see some of the inexperience here. So, in their acting, get into as we go along. So, let's get into the opening of this movie. So, we open here in Oklahoma, small town in Oklahoma. So, Caleb, he meets up at a bar with some of his cowboy friends, and, you know, he's out for some different kind of blood. Sees May, starts hitting on her, and she needs a ride home. One thing I did notice here is this opening moving very fast, like severely, maybe a minute with his friends, a minute with May, and then next thing you know, she bites him, and then like we're 3 minutes into the movie and she runs away. So, you know, it's a traditional B-movie opening. I felt the dialogue here was also a bit stilted. What was your take on these scenes?
Yeah, you're right. It goes quickly, which I'm okay with, because I don't need a 2.5 hour movie about vampires. You know, sometimes you got to keep the action moving, and then you have to sacrifice some of the setup that you might otherwise put here.
Even for, like, you know, I've watched a lot of 80s horrors, classic horrors, right? even compared to that, like, I felt there wasn't a lot of setup for tension here. And maybe that wasn't intentionally done. It wasn't the focus of Bigelow to set that up, and she wanted to go straight into him starting to turn.
Yeah.
But I felt there was no build to anything in the beginning.
No, I agree. No, I do agree. I think it might have been served better to spend a little bit more of the first act, burning into his eventual turn, as opposed to, his first few scenes where he gets bit. I find it interesting, I was watching this, when I watch movies now, and just in today's climate with things that are sort of happening in the world, I notice behavior from male characters towards female characters that is typically considered not only acceptable, but just normal, right? Mm. And he is pushing himself on her the whole time. Obviously, he's interested, and we're not led to believe that anything nefarious is going on his part. But I think it's interesting to watch. Look back. It's not that long ago. I guess we're looking at close to 30 years. But
you're getting almost into rape territory.
Well, yeah, that exactly. We almost are, and
right, because he stops the truck. Yeah. And says, "Well, you're not going any further until at least I get kissed."
Yeah, exactly.
He wants more. So it's like that's a little. So was this self-defense from her? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. It kind of look at it that way, like she's an immortal vampire. Yeah, she'll fucking give him no for an answer. She goddamn well pleases, and not because she's a woman, but because she's a creature of the night. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is borderline rape, borderline sexual assault for sure. Is it self-defense? No. Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way, right? If she wants to basically she's co-parenting a rape victim as her result of her self-defense. That's another layer that we probably don't need to examine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. So yeah, we missed a scene where he, went all Shatner, Kingdom of the Spiders on her and lassoed her, but let's skip that. And yeah, so after she bites him, she runs away because sunrise is coming. So, and he's not going to drive. So she just bolts. And then of course his truck doesn't start. So very convenient. So then he starts walking home. And this is where things visually start to get interesting as well, because he's not feeling well, of course. Sun's starting to come up and he's literally starting to smoke. And what did you think of now? This is something that you're going to continually see throughout the movie, is these guys starting to smoke when they're in the sun. What do you think of the visual flair here? Like this little trickery visual effects. Obviously this is a practical effect here. How they're doing it, probably pretty obvious. He's clutching his torso. There must be something in there that's setting off some smoke. So what did you think of these scenes?
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Yeah.
I like the practical smoke. I think it looks good. And that it wasn't, like I say, I didn't know anything about the movie. So first off, maybe this is kind of going back to the last couple scenes. I didn't put together that she was a vampire. I thought maybe she was from outer space because she was kind of looking up at the stars for a bit.
Okay.
So, once she bites him, then it's obviously starts to becomes clear what she is. Yeah, I thought it was a great little visual trick there. Looked great.
So then after she bit him, you're pretty sure this is a vampire flick.
Yeah, well, at that point, I kind of put it together. Well, that being said, I thought, maybe she is a vampire. Maybe she is still from outer space. Space vampire.
Space vampire.
Yes. That shit would have been fucking awesome.
Yes. So speaking of cooking, it literally is time to cook, as we see Jesse Pinkman's RV roll up and Caleb is grabbed right before his dad and his sister Sarah, before he was able to make it home. But instead of Heisenberg and Jesse Pinkman, we get our Aliens reunion special with Paxton, Henriksen, and Goldstein. So we talked about them. I love how Henriksen's even still rocking the Nick Cage hairline he had in Aliens there. So
I have a question for you, just not to break your rhythm there.
Oh, go ahead.
Is Lance Henriksen actually a vampire? Because this guy's the same fucking age, I swear to God, in 1987 as he is today. This guy does not age at all. Was he ever young?
No, I think that's really the question, is he just looked like a decrepit old man to begin with. And he has pretty much stayed that way.
Maybe that's the way to go, right? It's just look like a weathered old piece of like sun-dried tomato from like when you're like 21. For the next 60 years, people are like, God damn, you looking good.
No, you look exactly the same.
Yeah, you look exactly like you did 20 years ago.
Speaking of Cage, now this is a funny story, just popped in my head. The people were wondering if Nick Cage was actually a vampire because they saw some like 1800 painting picture and there's a guy who looks exactly like Cage, except he has a mustache. And Cage is adamant that is not him. I'm not sure I believe him, but it could be Cage. Cage could be immortal.
Methinks the lady doth protest a little too much in Nicolas Cage's case on that one.
So let's going back to the movie. So they won't kill him because even though they want to, she bit him, and she obviously likes Caleb and is saying he's starting to turn, which is true. So what did you think of the intro to the vampire gang? And that includes little Homer, Homer, Homer. So,
a little Homer.
Yes.
In my notes, I wrote, and I quote, Bill fucking Paxton. And that's pretty much it, because I see Bill Paxton, and when I'm not expecting to see him, I get really excited. So
I do too. He is such a great character actor. He's like Cage in a slightly similar yet different way, a little bit more restrained than the Cage. But every time you see him, your eyes are just
he steals every scene. Yeah. He's in every movie he's in.
I mean, not recently. I mean, he's more of a reserved actor now. He probably maybe, playing to his age. But my God, his earlier roles, he was a scene stealer in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Gang was kind of neat. I liked the RV. I'd seen them do something similar on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I saw it. I'm like, okay, maybe there's a connection there. It was a neat little gang. I mean, you've got the James Cameron regulars along with this creepy little kid, and there's nothing creepier in horror movies than little kids. So it was cool. As I'm understanding what the world is now and what's going on, I want to see more. Yeah, I thought it was a good intro.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good intro here too. So as they ditch the methmobile and they steal a station wagon, surprisingly they let Caleb leave, but probably because they know his thirst will bring him back. I like the scene now when he's trying to go home at the bus station and he gets a candy bar from a vending machine, and he is just not enjoying it anymore. But I find that strange because I think the first scene we see of May earlier, when Caleb spots her outside that bar at the beginning of the movie, she's eating an ice cream cone. And later in the movie, I think they're talking about ordering a pizza, the whole gang. I don't know if that's just part of the turning process or if there's just a logic issue here, but I mean, that's just a little nitpick.
Well, no, that's interesting because I like that detail where he tries to eat the candy bar and he can't. It's just disgusting. I thought that I really liked that, but I forgot about the ice cream cone, and they were talking about that pizza. So I think that's probably a logic issue more than that part of being the turning process, but.
Yeah, I just thought it was just a question I had. It's just like, okay, well, might have been interesting. I'm not saying it needed to be explained, but then when you see those kind of discrepancies, it just, you start to scratch your head, and it takes you, you start thinking about the discrepancies instead of enjoying the movie. Maybe that's my fault, looking at the details too much. So obviously he doesn't make it home. He gets off the bus because he's starting to really feel ill, gets back, and May lets him feed from her wrist. And I really like this scene. Like, you get another scene of him feeding off of her because I like the desperation, and this gives off that feeling of lust and that connection between the two vampires, right? As they feed off each other. And that's part of the genre, part of the lore, right? So,
is this the scene? So are we going to the part where she feeds him? Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah, like when he first comes back, like he's so weak, and then she just lets him feed off.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like that. I like these scenes because there was a sense of desperation and a connection, just that cannot escape this at all.
Yeah, no, I think Adrian Pasdar did a good job here with portraying that need. Yeah. That kind of goes back to the, what I was talking about the vampires before. It's just that baser emotion. Just, you gotta have it. Yeah, because it's been a couple weeks since I watched it. Is this the scene where there's all the oil derricks around and she cuts her hand open? Is that this scene?
It could be. I think that could be later because they do it twice. Because he still refuses. Right. We'll get into it. He refuses to kill. So
That's what I think.
There's another one.
All right.
So then after this, now we cut away to, as he's resting, they cut away to, you see Caleb's family, his dad and his sister Sarah looking for him, and they're worried. They go to the police officer, chief of police. I love how Caleb's dad just Batman to the fuck out of there because he didn't trust the police. So
yeah, totally.
Guy turns around and is like, where the fuck is he? So I found it refreshing. Again, I think we've done a couple of horror movies where we mentioned it's refreshing that characters do a logical thing. I mean, whether this is illogical or logical, but I wouldn't trust a small town sheriff to do jack shit. He'd pretty much be confined by jurisdiction. So I like these scenes. Again, it's good to point out. Strange that I keep seeing these takes because that's kind of like a cliche that nobody does a sensible thing. But here we are in the few horror movies we talked about, and people are doing sensible things.
That's why we're the Rare Antiquities podcast, Harry. We're not on the beaten track here.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Then May is telling Caleb he has to accept who he is and he needs to kill. So you get couple of shots of Homer and Severin getting their victims. This is the part where you see the flashbacks as she's explaining it to him. And not flashbacks, but you see what they're doing. Like, I think Homer, he's pretending to be kind of dead or fainted near his bike on the street, pulls a guy to him, and then you get a funny little what the fuck going on with Paxton here is he's by himself in a cowboy outfit on the side, and he's just kind of rotating with the gun.
Yeah.
Nobody's there, and then he finally hitchhikes a ride. And then he gets the ladies in. Again, it's such a short scene, but you see Paxton's charm and comedic chops here in full display, so I did enjoy that. But then we get into what the meat and potatoes of the movie is Caleb continues to refuse to kill. And the rest of the movie is really about this gang trying to get him to kill. So this is the concept of the movie before Blade. You get to see it in Blade where, Blade finds a way around not killing people thanks to some whatever serum or something like that. So this is Caleb who's just, turning to be a vampire, I guess is a vampire in some sense, and he's temptation to the dark side. So again, keep going back to Anakin's portrayal and his temptations and stuff. But I have a question for you, and you can talk about it as we progress, but are there layers here to Caleb's resistance and his temptation and his resistance? Or is it just a simple little concept and it goes nowhere?
I guess it depends on where you want to pull it from. I mean, we don't know a lot about Caleb other than he's a, farm boy, other than his penchant to force himself on pretty young ladies in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. I think there's this concept of, you see it in a lot of movies and you see it in a lot of books where the good guys are often the salt of the earth, rural, simple, whether they're farmers or just, small town mechanic or whatever. They're always the good guys. We saw that in Kingdom of the Spiders with William Shatner. We see it in lots of movies now. Those guys are always the good guys. And the bad guys are always the city dwellers or the urbanites. I don't want to say the future, but the values that are not the simple, small town, for lack of a better term, conservative values. So many movies so many stories are like that. So I think that they're using that as shorthand for Caleb's character here. We don't know a lot about him, but because he's a farm boy and because he has a little sister and a dad and no mom, that's all shorthand for him being a really solid, good guy. So when he's presented with this situation of this primal need to kill, to eat, or to feed, and not just to feed, but in the most heinous way possible by gleefully murdering other human beings. I mean, this entire gang of vampires, they couldn't do it. They take pleasure in it, and he is resisting. So I see that conflict coming to the surface here, where he's the one who's able to do it. But it's because he's got the good country boy values. I do think that that's what's going on here.
Okay. No, I agree. I'm not sure how. I kind of wish they showed a little bit more of that temptation. I mean, we're going to get into a scene where in the bar, they really want him to pass that kind of test.
Yeah.
But I mean, we do get a scene just now where May and Caleb are hitchhiking and she wants Caleb to kill the truck driver. Caleb just can't do it. He's sick to his stomach and he has to get out. And then May kills the driver for him instead, but he still won't even drink his blood. And this is the scene where I think you see him still drinking from her in front of the pumps, oil pumps, and then he almost kills her because he's trying to drink too much from her. So I'm not sure if there's like kind of a symbiotic relationship just between him and her. If this is really just is it Bigelow just talking about his only interest is only her, his only attraction and temptation is to her and not to the vampires. He's strong enough to not give in, except he's easily giving in to her, but nothing else. So yeah, again, you're talking about good country values. Protagonist will still not give in, but I feel it's a little muddy here because he's still willing to drink from her. So I'm not really sure what she's trying to say. And it's important to note that Bigelow had a writing credit on this film as well. Directed. So I'm not really sure what the message is.
He doesn't want to kill. I don't think he has a problem feeding, and she's willing to give herself to him. So
right, but then so she kills the truck driver. He's dead.
Right.
And he won't still feed off the carcass. So is that just him kind of like saying, this is my stance? You're willingly letting me drink food, but even when the guy's dead, I'm still not. So, and then it's also interesting, animals. I'm not saying, I'm all for animal rights too, but that subject matter wasn't even broached. I'm pretty sure I can't remember which vampire movies are out there, but might be Blade. I'm not sure where some vampire wasn't killing people, but he was eating off vampires. Not vampire, I mean animals. And for the love of God.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. I think that's fucking Twilight. Fuck.
Well, no,
I mean, fucking...
God damn it.
God damn it.
It's a part of you now, Harry. Twilight is now a part of you, my friend.
Fuck.
Because I haven't seen it, but that was a theme in Interview with the Vampire.
Oh, okay.
And the vampire played by... So Brad Pitt's character was in the same place. He refused to kill. So he would feed off of animals whenever possible. Rats and, stray dogs and that kind of thing. And what was interesting about Interview with the Vampire was you could do it. The vampires could do it, but they were miserable when they didn't feed off of human blood. Mm-hmm. They could survive, but they were miserable. Yeah. It wasn't the same. They hated it. But they could do it to survive.
Not enough nutritional value.
Yeah, exactly.
They need
a lot of empty calories there.
Yeah, they need the blood of like fat, obese Americans who are just, snacking on Mickey D's and French fries and candy bars and
exactly.
Shit like that.
Exactly. They need the high insulin levels of Americans.
Yeah.
Really sustain themselves. That's why French vampires are such assholes. Is like all those skinny people who smoke all the time doesn't help.
So Caleb's resistance here is driving Jesse a little bananas, and he's had enough, and he wants Caleb to make a kill that night. So now we get our extended tech noir scene here. So they go to the dive bar, redneck bar, middle of nowhere, and arguably, maybe not arguably, this is probably the best scene in the movie where Paxton, the character Severin, really shines here. These guys just go to town on the people in that bar, and it's really about Paxton just allowing himself to let loose. And I'm not sure if you noticed, you even get the other cameo of that T2 biker guy in this bar.
Yeah, totally. I noticed that.
You forgot to say please. So
that was awesome to see that guy.
Yeah. So
because this was before Terminator 2 by quite a few years, so that was neat.
Yeah, it's before T2. So what did you think of this whole scene here? And this thing, you could talk about everything: the slaughter, the performances from all the gang here, the kills, and Caleb's last sole survivor there. He allows him to escape.
Good scene. Very good scene. And definitely Bill Paxton takes this one over. And I love how he keeps fucking with that dude at the bar where he knocks the drink over.
Right.
And then has the bartender pour him another drink.
And he says, pay the man.
Yeah, exactly. Makes him pay for it.
Yeah, that was great.
That was so good.
Yeah, it was great. And then he says, oh, you want to fight? And then the guy's about to punch him, but he pulls up Caleb in the middle, who's too weak to move because he's hungry. So he's just pulls him up, and the guy punches him and says, oh, just continue. I'm trying to teach him a lesson.
Yeah. So such a good scene because it starts to draw out a little bit because at first it's kind of funny. You know what's coming. Mm-hmm. And at first it's playful and it's kind of funny. And then they just start, eating everybody. And it draws out. It feels to me very deliberately so that it's not fun anymore on purpose because now, as we're sort of seeing the movie through Adrian, it's not fun anymore and the reality starts to set in. It's very chilling, especially when...
Well, that the people here are now, after a couple of scenes, all the patrons there in the barkeep, they know they're just in shock and silence because they know they're fucked.
Yeah, exactly.
They know that these guys aren't normal. Nothing's going to do shit and they're in serious trouble.
Yeah, and this is probably the best, in my opinion, this is the best horror movie element of this film is this scene here with the building dread and horror. We know what's going to happen. There's nothing anybody can do about it, but you're kind of like the average moviegoer in us is like, we're hoping Adrian's going to save the day, but it's just completely impossible. I really liked when May started dancing with the sole survivor there. It's kind of to get Adrian worked up so he'd go and chow down. But very super chilling.
Yeah, that was a nice moment, a very seductive moment and smart move by May to try and really get him, hopefully get Caleb jealous enough so he'll actually do something, right? Mm-hmm. Good move by her, even though it didn't work. But I wanted to point out a couple of scenes here. I mean, we already talked about Paxton stealing the show, but Henriksen here probably has his best moment in the film. It's in a really creepy way while he's very calm and the barkeep says something to him and he starts slowly moving to the door, closes it. He says, oh, I just need an extra few minutes of your time, the exact time for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, good line.
Yeah, it's a great line. And he says it so calmly. He's got a nice little smile on his face. But his eyes, Henriksen's eyes there, it's just really haunting.
Yeah.
By design?
Be careful when you stare into Lance Henriksen's eyes because the abyss will stare back into you.
Yes. But then this is followed up by one of Paxton's great lines. He's about to kill, he crushes that guy's head in a little bit, and then he wants to eat him. He sniffs looks at the guy's neck, sniffs, and I love this sexual innuendo, and he goes, I hate it when they ain't shaved.
Yeah.
Oh my my God, I bust a gut laughing there, man.
That's a good line.
That was a great line. That was amazing. Yeah. So then, like, obviously Caleb chases the guy out because the guy does a Shatner barrel roll through the window there, and Caleb chases him, but lets him go, catches up to him, lets him go. But then Jesse company are furious. But again, can't deal with Caleb because the sun is going up. And I wanted to talk about this because this happened a couple of times earlier in the film where the sun keeps fucking coming up. And this is not about the fucking rotational turning of the earth. But it's the time. No, because it is a thing. It's the timing. And I think this is a crux of the film, and it'll get in the third act here, where what the fuck are these guys doing? The vampires fucking know you don't go at 15 minutes, 20 minutes till sunrise to start doing your shit. So it's a movie I'm not supposed to make, it's not supposed to really think about these kind of things, especially with this type of genre, but it really started to bug me because it happened before, it happened here, it's going to happen again in the third act a couple times where, oh shit, the sun's coming up. Well, no fucking shit. So why are you starting all of your, rampage so close to sunrise? And I guess it's just the way the writers are trying to get out of these scenarios, right? These kind of loopholes, because now Jesse and Severin and Diamondback can't deal with Caleb here. So they have to go to a hotel and sleep it off. So that's just to get to the next scene. But I found it lazy writing. I wasn't a fan of it.
I mean, you're right. Unless it's the far north in the middle of summer and it's, 3:30.
This is Oklahoma in the West.
Yeah, exactly. So
Texas.
Right. So it's not like here where we have extraordinarily short nights. We have a lot of sunlight in the summertime. It's not like that. I mean, I guess it is a crutch for the writers to fall back on as a dramatic tool to, amp up the tension. But you know what I found? You're right. It is a crutch. It's not the right, it's not smart. There isn't any other interventions there. Yeah. Like you'd be starting it. It's probably dark at, 9:30. Mm-hmm. They could go out and cause carnage and nap for a bit and go out and cause some more and still be, home in time to crawl into your coffin. I find a lot of movies that are not vampire related have a real difficult time with dusk and nighttime and dawn. It's like the sun's coming up, it's going down. You don't know. It's difficult. I think it's because it's very difficult to manage as a filmmaker, just from a technical standpoint, what time of day it is. Now it's a little easier because you can, filter stuff out.
Well, you also have a budget problem too. If it's a low budget movie, you have a production crew sitting around. You're not going to wait till the following evening if your budget is that tight to continue filming.
Yeah.
An area and stuff like that. I mean, you don't have green screen at this time, but still, because this is a repetitive problem in this movie, it keeps cropping up. I thought I'd point it out. I'm not a fan of that kind of lazy writing. So obviously they go to the hotel room in the middle of nowhere. Police arrive because the sole survivor notified the police. They were able to track down their van, and now we get the shootout. And this is another little interesting piece of the movie. I enjoyed it. What are your thoughts here? I'll let you talk about it.
On the shootout?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this is a very good scene for a couple of reasons. First is I thought it was curtains for the vampires at this point. I thought that things were going to start to come to a head here. There's a neat setup here where the bullets aren't going to do too much, but they're punching holes in this shitty little cabin they're staying in. So they have to basically dodge the sunlight, which was kind of cool. And, it's not a question of them being able to outshoot the cops. They got to get to that. They got to get to the car to escape before the whole thing collapses. Usually a shootout's just, us versus them.
Right.
This is a little bit different. You've got the layer of they have to stay out of the sun and they have to escape without exploding into, violent fireballs. I thought it was very well filmed. I thought there was lots of tension here. I thought it was technically very good. Yeah, great shootout. Thought it was good.
Yeah, no, I thought this is where one of the better scenes in the movie, again, very visually interesting, because you mentioned about all the holes and the sunlight beaming through. There's a lot of great camera shots here where some of the sunlight's hitting them and they're burning, but it's not like their whole bodies. It's like an arm, a shoulder, something like that. And, I thought it was really, really interesting. I had a lot of fun with this scene, and I still laughed out loud at Paxton as he looks outside and the sun burns him, fucking dumbass mofo. What do you think? You could see that it's sunny outside behind the curtains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What I really liked as well, and I wanted to point it out, is as Caleb is making a run for it in the van, and he's got a blanket or a curtain over him, he's getting shot, and you still see the smoking effects, and you're seeing it even more so now. Looks really good, and I think even the blanket catches on fire, but you also see the police shoot him and fucking squibs. Now, squibs, common in the 80s, early 90s, and I love squibs. You know what squibs are, right?
Yeah. The condom filled with fake blood. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. I love seeing old school practical effects here because you don't get that and you get all this fake CGI blood nonsense. Doesn't look realistic. Not that squibs are particularly realistic. They're a little bit, they're obviously exaggerated. The amount of blood that would come out instantaneously. It's like an explosion of blood. You get just shot in the shoulders. Like, I mean, you're obviously not going to have that much blood come out instantaneously. I mean, it will flow afterwards, but I still love seeing squibs. So props for that. Him getting burned on fire, great special effects. So I thought I wanted to point that out. I really love this scene. So now we're getting into the third act here. And I think this is where the movie starts to have some problems. Let's talk about it scene by scene. So the family, they escape. They're back in another hotel room, Caleb and company, and all is forgiven because he managed to get the van and get everybody away from the cops. I mean, Jesse's saying he's gonna give him another chance, but all of a sudden Caleb's family tracks him down. Bit coincidental, the sisters just being out there in the same hotel room. That's obviously a lazy plot point here. And she's targeted by Homer and he wants to probably feed on her is my guess here. These scenes here are not very cliche and not very good. Feels like almost the movie's running out of budget and they just got to wrap things up. So this is the only way they had to go. Again, it's dark and we see Sarah's outside. Obviously I think they mentioned it's 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something like that. And then what she's doing up that late, I don't know, but regardless, that's okay. She's getting a Coke. Homer brings her into the room where they are. And then Severin gets the dad because Diamondback is find out the room he's staying in from Sarah. And then Caleb shows up with May and then the dad's there with Severin and they're going to kill everybody. But then Sarah opens the door and it's broad daylight outside. Just like that. So again, what I'm talking about here, this lazy writing, these kind of loopholes just to get around the story. I'm not a fan of these kind of scenes. So what do you think?
I think there's difficulty, as I said before. Part of it is a writing problem. Part of it is an editing problem. And, they're just not, it's hard to foresee what the finished product is going to look like when you're writing it and when you're even filming the movie. So I'm okay to cut them a bit of a break. And the reason why I say is I see these problems in so many movies that aren't vampire movies. There's more consequences when it is a vampire movie, obviously, because, the sunlight's an issue. I did notice it as well, but I don't want to say it's lazy. I think it's just a result of it being low budget and you have restrictions and sometimes you just can't beat them. So I'm willing to cut the movie some slack because of some of the other things that are working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So then they escape. Caleb escapes with his family and he takes them home. And again, this is now the what the fuck moment for me. The blood transfusion. So conveniently stupid. He's in the van as they go home, looks back. Oh, Dad, you got some supplies there. Can you give me a blood transfusion? What the fuck?
Yeah, I was a little confused as well. Why did he think that this would be a thing that would work? Like the dad. Like, he doesn't know what vampire, he's a vampire. They don't
talk about it. I'll just give you a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is too easy of a resolution. So I hated this. This is terrible. This is Into Darkness all over again for me. Maybe this is where JJ got it. I don't know, but something's going on here and I'm not a fan. So instead of running away, now he's cured the next morning. So instead of running away and relocating his family, they just decided to stay and surprise, surprise, Jesse and company come back and they kidnap Sarah. So Caleb gives chase and they go into a small town. And of course, in many movies, not just horror movies, nobody's there at all. I know it's a little late at night, but geez, there's nobody in this town. It's completely desolate. And
have you ever been in a small town after dark?
Yeah, I've been to a few, but there's
it's exactly like it's empty.
No, there's dive bars, man. People are out. People are there.
Oh, I don't know, man. I've been in a few, and it's like in cities in towns larger than this, and it's like the sun sets, and it's like they're running from the creatures of the night. There's tumbleweeds and the whole bit. It's empty. I'm okay with that part.
Well, if you're in the area where maybe the people are picking berries instead of the bars, I'm hanging around the bar areas. I don't know about you.
There's a bar. There's a bar.
Anyways.
And I don't know that guys like you want to be in there.
That is true. So.
Yeah, that's right.
I wanted to just briefly touch on something here. Now, the look and feel of this movie, because these scenes here, and it reminded me of Terminator 1, both in structure and the look.
And the exploding tanker truck.
And if you forget the exploding tanker truck, of course, that's just a throwback to T1 here. But the director of photography of this movie, sorry, forgot his name to write it down. He's the same director of photography from Terminator. Okay. So she loved the look of Terminator and she wanted to replicate that kind of lighting effect, the way the movie was lit. And you could see it here. This feels like Terminator 1. Exactly. Yeah. And you kind of get that kind of bluish tint, natural hues. I just love the way it felt. But since you're getting the exact, photographer who's, and lighter who's doing Terminator 1, it's going to look very similar. But I thought I'd point that out. Here you get Severin, who runs into Caleb here. And I love his death strut as he's welcoming getting run over. He's just like, come on, let's go. He's just Paxton. But so Caleb runs him over, and then Paxton's, gets hit. He's all bloody, but he's climbing up on the top of the truck, and then Caleb just jackknifes the truck and then jumps out. Now, I'm not sure how it explodes, but it just does.
I wrote that down in my notes.
Yeah.
Why did that truck explode?
No, because he pulled out a couple of wires. I can understand it not stopping.
Yeah.
Or the engine failing, but why did it explode?
It was like that when, what's his name in The Simpsons drove off the road and hit the tree. And then 10 seconds later, the car bursts into flames.
This is just
because it did.
Yeah, this is just because we need to wrap this movie. Yeah. And let's kill Severin off quickly. I liked the scene, the lead up to it. I just wish there was more here, especially with Bill Paxton's character. It felt very rushed, a little bit anticlimactic. But again, because you're dealing with a very small budget, I'm assuming that's the reason why. And then you get the standoff with Jesse and Diamondback, and then May saves Caleb from getting shot. And again, dawn is coming. And so again, why did Jesse and company decide to do this so late at night? You kidnapped the dog. Just before it was they were having dinner. If you remember Caleb at his dad's house. Yeah. And then this was the next town over. I'm assuming he wasn't traveling for several hours. Probably just went to the next town over outside of his farm, and then they had the standoff. He's on a fucking horse. So I don't know what's going on. Again, this is a big problem in the movie for me. I really hate them relying on, it's dawn now. Dawn's coming. So
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but I suppose when you have a vampire movie, I mean, if you can give me a vampire movie where dawn, daylight isn't a player.
It's a player, but it's a player too often in this film.
You're right. It does it keeps coming up, so it keeps pushing against the events of the film. It's like everything's happening and now the sun is coming up, and then other things happen and now the sun is coming up, and everything's happening and now the sun's coming up again.
Yeah. So this
I guess I could see it's a bit repetitive.
Yeah, it's a bit repetitive, and you're just relying on this to help the protagonist, and I think that weakens them, weakens the story, weakens the resolution, because I want something more creative instead of just this, they're just going to burst into flame. Because what happens here is then Jesse grabs Sarah in the car. May saves her by breaking out of the back of the car station wagon because she doesn't, she feels for Caleb and, doesn't want his sister to be turned or be killed. And even though I like the burning effects here, now obviously we should point out that this is some very interesting and cool visual effects that are being done here, because Horny Homer gives chase and he starts bursting into flames, and you see it all over his face. I'm not sure this is CGI. And
no, it's not. It's 1987. It's definitely not CGI.
Because if it is, that is amazing special effects work, because it looks very real. And the interesting thing here is you can definitely see this is that Joshua John Miller actor who's running away, and his face is on flames.
My guess is it's probably a mask over top of a stunt performer there lighting on fire. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, but there were a couple of close effect shots, and it looked exactly like him. So if that's a mask, that's pretty impressive work.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, hey, I mean, that mask of Arnie when he's cutting his eyeball out in the Terminator was pretty effective too. So it's not like it can't be done.
But that's true. That is true. So then obviously Homer starts burning and he explodes, and then again, I hated the resolution here. It's so rushed. Then Jesse and Diamondback see that, they turn their car around. They want to take a run at May and Caleb, and Caleb's covered May up with his jacket because she started to burn, but she made it, but she's unconscious. They run towards her, and funny thing here is they're covered up with blankets, partially. I understand their hands starting to burn, being exposed to sunlight because some of the sunproofing on their car is gone or is damaged, but they just completely burst into flames, and they're just kind of content with it, and then they explode. And I'm not a fan of that ending. Just such a letdown for me. And then it cuts to May waking up the next day, and she received the con blood, and I guess they live happily ever after. The movie just ends there. What did you think of this ending? This is very, very rushed.
I think it's starting to look like a theme in the films that we've examined, where things start to fall apart in the third act. Pretty common.
Yeah, I mean, the third act seems... Yeah. It's
hard, right?
It's hard. It's hard to, whether, the writers just get so tired of writing. They said, okay, let's just finish this. We got two-thirds of the film. We got something good here. It's good enough. Or it's a budget problem if they're filming in order and they have a problem near the end. But we know movies aren't really filmed in order necessarily. I don't know how the budgetary reasoning on movies is like, do these fucking accountants who approved the budget, they go through scene by scene from start to finish.
Yeah, they do.
They get to the third act and says, "Oh, we've run out of money." Sorry.
Yeah, you have what's called a line producer, and they do go line by line, scene by scene to budget out the whole thing to decide where you're spending your money. I think it's more a structure problem because a film is a 3-act narrative structure. It just is. Unless you're Terrence Malick, your film is a 3-act, no deviation from that. So, the advantages of that structure is you can kind of you have a skeleton already, you can build a story on top of it. And we talked a bit about how maybe the first act where they rushed into a little bit with his turn. The second act is where all the meat happens. And then you get to the third act. I mean, you've got 90 minutes to work with a low budget film. Even with big budget films, sometimes you have 90 minutes. So you have a limited amount of time to wrap everything up because you've got to wrap everything up. And you're making a movie, so there's certain things that need to happen, especially in the 80s. The guy's got to get the girl, so we got to have time for that. We have to have some kind of conflict that needs to be resolved with the good guy coming out on top. So we have these. I think the problem here is we have these standard things that need to happen in a movie when we're talking about, in this context, we have a Hollywood movie. We have things that need to happen with the resolution, the guy getting the girl, the bad guy's dying in a dramatic conflict. And unfortunately, all of that's sort of being sprinkled on top of some really interesting shit that was happening in the second act and even the first act that, so it does feel rushed. It does feel like it's not necessarily consistent with what we've seen before because it isn't, because we got to wrap shit up. Story like this is probably better served on a longer form in a TV show or whatever like that, which is what we start to see nowadays. But we're 30 years later, so
that's true. This is a common issue in very simple horror movies, especially in the slasher genre. Things wrap up pretty quick, but it's still not really an excuse.
Well, no, I don't think it's an excuse in the sense of, I don't want to let anybody off the hook, but there are trappings of the structure of the system that are very difficult to break out of. For better or worse, like I say, I'm not trying to excuse this movie or any other movie that breaks down in the third act. They should be able to put it together. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's a problem that doesn't start or stop with Near Dark, right? It's a systemic issue.
Well, then what did you think about then the blood transfusion?
I mean, I had the con blood thought sort of flashed through my mind, but I didn't know. I didn't staple that to them because this is 1987. I was actually fine with it because I had never seen that in a vampire movie before as a potential solution.
Well, I think don't they do something similar? But they do something very different yet similar with Blade because he's getting some kind of serum, or I don't know if it's antibodies or antibodies is blood. So
yeah, they invent some kind of serum because he's a human vampire hybrid, Blade, right? Whatever that means. So they have a serum that helps him not need human blood, I think. But he could still feed off of blood and it would be fine, but he doesn't need it because of the serum.
And I should prefer that because it keeps him at bay. Here, it's a total cure.
Well, it's a cure, but I've only ever seen one other movie where they suggested a cure for vampirism, which was called, I think it's called
The Cure?
No, I think it's called Daylight with Ethan Hawke, and the entire world is vampires. Like there are no humans left.
Oh, okay.
The only humans left, there's like a few humans left, but they're in like it's a farm basically, and it's a blood bank, right? So they drain the blood of these very few humans who are left alive because the vampires have taken over. So the vampires all start to starve to death. And if I recall correctly, Willem Dafoe is one of the few remaining free humans. And he and Ethan Hawke accidentally discover a cure for vampirism by accidentally shooting him with a shotgun in the sunlight. It was some crazy, stupid bullshit. Terrible movie. Don't waste your time. But that's the only other movie I've ever heard of. Like, nobody's ever tried to cure it. So when I saw this in the context of when it was made, I'm like, okay, well, they're looking for a cure. Okay, I was like, okay, I guess, yeah, fuck it. Sure, that's okay. I'm all right with that. I was fine with it. I didn't love it, but I was okay with it.
Well, I take the opposite approach. I'm not okay with it. Maybe I'm just a little too sensitive after seeing this kind of resolution happen.
What's the resolution? I mean, because otherwise, Otherwise, he's a vampire forever, right?
Well, he could just sacrifice himself. I don't know. I guess that's a cliche ending as well. I mean, I think I've seen this in other... I think this was even Blade 2, I think, where female love interest for Wesley Snipes is Blade. Something happens that causes her to say, fuck it, I'm just going to let's go sit and watch sunrise and I'm just going to burn to death.
That.
I don't know if that's Blade 2, Blade 3, whatever the fuck that is.
Well, that happened in 28 Days Later, or not 28 Days Later, 30 Days
of Night or something?
30 Days of Night, yeah, thank you.
Or maybe that's it. So maybe I'm thinking about that.
Where Josh, what's his name?
Not a bad movie, actually.
No, it's not. That's not a bad movie. That was actually pretty cool. But he does the same thing. They go and watch the sunrise and he burns up as ashes. I just want to say, I love the fact that we're talking about Blade and Blade 2 on the podcast here. Don't get enough love. Anyway.
Well, I'm not sure about Blade 2, but Blade definitely is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like we're talking about Blade 3 here, okay? Like 1, 2, okay.
Well, the original Blade's pretty sweet.
Yeah, Blade's pretty sweet. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that probably does it for today's episode, our discussion on Kathryn Bigelow's... Actually, before we wrap this up, let's talk about Kathryn Bigelow's directorial performance here. Any comments?
I will say, we talked about her a bit before. I thought that this was a very well shot movie, especially for such a low budget. Very technically proficient. I thought that it looked, for the money, I thought it looked great. I thought that she did a great job getting good performances out of actors who, I don't know what the right term is, but like these guys, none of these guys who are in this movie, especially at this time, are used to being in impactful roles in a film. And they all gave us good performances. And I loved how they shot May. Jenny Wright. I loved how they shot her. She looks just how she was lit. There was sort of it was like almost slow motion. She looked so ethereal, otherworldly, beautiful, but supernatural. There was something about how they lit her and put the cameras on her that was absolutely fantastic. And it's almost a subconscious thing. And I was mesmerized every time she was on the screen. And as I started like really looking for it, I'm like, it's a little bit of slow-mo there. The lighting's perfect. So yeah, Kathryn Bigelow did one hell of a job directing this film, and the director of photography, whose name I guess will be lost to the annals of time, Adam Greenberg, was this director of photography here, who's done a lot of stuff. Did one awesome of a job, I thought, for pennies of a budget.
I absolutely agree. I think the weakness of this film is more on the writing, and unfortunately the budget does not help the third act. If that was indeed a budgetary issue, most likely it is. Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't get a stronger ending to this film, but let's get to our final thoughts here. But I agree she did an amazing job considering the budget she was given. Very technically proficient, visually striking, some great scenes to watch, some great setups, some good moments. And I agree the acting overall is very good, but I mean, I think the Aliens crew really steals the show, especially Paxton. I found Henriksen a little underused, I felt. I really think they could have utilized him a little more. They just really relied on Bill Paxton, and I mean, rightfully so, to carry a lot of the scenes with the vampire gang. But when Henriksen was allowed to do something, he also was very noticeable and striking and scary. It was a good performance. I just wish he and Jeanette Goldstein had more to do in the film. That was a bit of a shame. And I think Caleb, Adrian Pasdar, and Jenny Wright, they did a good job. I wouldn't say an amazing job, but suitable for the roles. And even though there's not a lot of depth here, in my opinion. But let's get to the final thoughts. Do you recommend Near Dark? What kind of recommendation is it for you? And is it a rare entity?
I'm not ashamed to say I really loved the shit out of this movie. I enjoyed it. I didn't know a goddamn thing going into it, and I just lit up with joy almost at every turn. Part of that was the Aliens crew. Part of that was how, I could recognize the James Cameron influences here. I really liked it. I really, really liked it. And I'm going to say that that's a strong recommendation for me. Big fat smile on my face for 89 minutes.
And is it a rare antiquity?
Yeah. I'm going to say it is a rare antiquity. And I think the reasons why, like I say, I'm not going to hold against it the third act, because I think that's a problem with so many films for the reasons I've discussed. Very well directed and very well shot for a shoestring budget. Really good performances from actors who are not powerhouses. Every actor here is they're all supporting actors, and they all took their turn in the spotlight. Bill Paxton stole the show. Problems aside, you're not going to see a movie. They just don't do this kind of thing anymore. It's a shame that it wasn't better received at the time. So I'm going to say, Rare Antiquity for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a mild recommend. I did enjoy the film. I think based on the genre, like, I wouldn't classify this as a great movie, but it's a good movie for the genre itself. And I think the main strengths here is Kathryn Bigelow's directing. There are definitely some set pieces here that are very interesting to see. They're very well shot. Bar scene, the shootout, when the vampires are burning. I mean, these are must-watch scenes, considering the genre. But, so I'll give it a mild recommendation, and not a weak one, not a strong one, just right in the middle. But I will go against you and say this is no Rare Antiquity, not even close, because I feel that aside from some good scenes, I mean, Kathryn Bigelow did a good job. Actors did good enough job. I like the way this movie looks. The third act is just too much of a problem for me. I can't give it a pass. I think other vampire movies have done it better, and they really didn't bring a lot new to the table here to really distinguish itself from the rest of the pack. And the terrible ending, those conveniences with the damn sun rising. I mean, these vampires aren't very smart, and I think that's a big crux to the movie. Unfortunately, the third act is just, it balls to the wall. Fun in some scenes, but also terrible. And I was just saying, what the fuck? It's too bad. It was almost there, but the third act was better. This would definitely be, in my opinion, if third act was better, it would definitely be in that top 30. That would be ranking 34 out of the 50. Easy in my book, but it doesn't deserve that recognition. So Jeff, that does it for today's show. Kathryn Bigelow's 1987's Near Dark. What do you have in store for us next for episode 26?
So this past one was your holiday pick, and now we're into the Christmas season. So my pick is from 1954, starring Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney, White Christmas.
White Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay. I never heard of it, but White Christmas is the first Black Mirror episode, so I was like, White Christmas. Yeah. I was like, I would love to talk about that, but no, I was looking forward to it.
That was a good episode, yeah.
John Hamm was amazing in that one.
Yeah, he was really good. Yeah, he was really good.
But looking forward to it. Back to the 50s. Looking forward to it. Should be fun.
It'll be great, man. It'll be fun.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today, Jeff, and we'll see you next time.
All right, man. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take it easy.